Welcome, everybody. We'll call the meeting to order. Welcome to this meeting of the Fargo Planning Commission. The date's April 2nd, the hour's 3 o'clock, and we will get started. First item on the agenda is to approve the order of agenda. We'll walk through it. Items 1A and B have been withdrawn, Timber Creek 9th edition. We will hear item 2, items 3, 4, 5, and 6. We will hear item 7, which is section 14, Township 138 North, Range 49 West, is continued to next month, May 7th. And we will hear items 8 and 9. With that, any questions, or I would entertain a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion, is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Second item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was held on March 5th. They were included in your packet. Does anybody have any additions or corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Second. There's a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Next item is the brown bag. Being we are still in flood mode at the city, there will be no brown bag meeting this month. I assume we'll be back to normal, hopefully, possibly in May. So with that, we'll move right into the public hearing items. As I said, 1A and B have been withdrawn. We'll hear item number 2, Inland Park Parts Company 2nd edition from Aaron.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Item 2 is titled Inland Truck Parts Company 2nd Edition. This is a request for a minor subdivision. This application is being represented by Brian Pattengale with Houston Engineering, should you have any questions for the applicant. Essentially, the request for a minor subdivision is intended to take this single lot and to divide it into 2 new lots. Lot 2 would contain the existing developed portions of the property, and then Lot 1 would be vacant for future development. The subject property is located between 39th Street South and 38th Street South at the 3500 block in South Fargo. Staff's reviewed the proposal and finds that it meets all applicable review criteria, and staff is recommending approval of this minor subdivision. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have for staff.
Thank you, Aaron. Commissioners, any questions for Aaron? Okay, can hear from the applicant. Wish to speak? Okay, any questions for the applicant? Okay, we will open up the public comment portion. Are there any members of the audience that wish to speak in favor of or in opposition to the application? Just as a reminder, we'll have you come up to this podium over here if you wish to speak. Seeing none, we'll close the public comment. Commissioners, any discussion? You ready to act? Yep, Mike.
Madam Chair, I'll offer the motion that's included in our staff report.
Okay, we have a motion and there's a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote, please.
McGilkey.
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye.
Holtz.
Aye.
Sobolik.
Aye.
Stofferin.
Aye.
Morgan.
Aye.
Bachmeyer.
Aye.
Gunkelman.
Aye.
Tassa.
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye, motion is carried. We will hear now items 3, 4, 5, and 6 from Megan. As there's a similar theme here, she will present some information on all of them, and then we'll go one at a time and vote on each separately. Megan?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Items 3 through 6, as Commissioner Fisher noted, I will present just a brief overview, including locations of these 4 applications. They're all very similar, but are vary just slightly between the 4. So items 1 through 3 is Blue Water Creek Edition, 3rd Edition, Bentley Place 1st Edition, Timber Parkway 3rd Edition, and Timber Creek 8th Edition. Blue Water Creek 3rd Edition is located at the intersection of 32nd Avenue and 45th Street. Bentley Place 1st Edition, item 4, is located just east of the intersection of 32nd Avenue and Veterans Boulevard. Item 5, Timber Parkway 3rd Edition, is located just off of 52nd Avenue east of I-29, and Timber Creek 8th is located at the intersection of Timber Parkway South and 52nd Avenue. These three applications are very similar. They are all applications for a zoning change to repeal and reestablish existing conditional overlays. The current conditional overlays on all of the properties prohibit off-premise advertising, and the applicant has requested to essentially remove this requirement in order to allow off-premise advertising. This is just a quick map. You should have a laydown item in front of you that just shows a study area of where there are existing conditional overlays along our main corridors of Veterans, 32nd Avenue, 45th Street, and 52nd Avenue. These are commercial areas that show all of the conditional overlays that restrict or prohibit off-premise advertising. So you'll see that in urban plains, there are a couple of zoning districts or residential that are included in here, but generally, for the whole urban plains area, there's conditional overlays that restrict off-premise advertising, and everything you see in orange has conditional overlays that prohibit off-premise advertising. And in the black box, you can see all four of the applications here on 32nd and then 52nd Avenue. Just one quick note that applies for all of these applications, that if they are approved, the proposed signs would be reviewed against the requirements of the sign code for compliance at the time a permit is received. So staff is now going to just present each item individually, and we'll go from there. So item 3, Blue Water Creek 3rd Edition, is an application for a zoning change to repeal and reestablish a conditional overlay. The property is Lot 1, Block 1, Blue Water Creek 3rd Edition, located at 4504 32nd Avenue South. Kyle Fryer and Mike Dragosevich are here in the audience representing the application and can answer any questions that you have. Currently, the conditional overlay on the property prohibit off-premise advertising, and the applicant has requested to remove that prohibition to allow the off-premise advertising. A little bit of context. This is just at the southwest corner of 32nd Avenue and 45th Street. To the north is the Urban Plains development, and within the rest of this block is a upper scale commercial mixed-use center or walkable center, and commercial continues south on 45th Street. The applicant proposes a 25-foot tall, 300 square foot digital billboard with one side to be digital, east facing, one side on the west would be a static billboard. This would face 32nd Avenue South. And just a quick note, as you might see in some of the materials, the application was originally intended to face 45th Street and has been modified to face 32nd Avenue. This image was submitted by the applicant, just shows the context of existing structures that are there and the height of the billboard and the face of the billboard. And another image submitted by the applicant to show the billboard kind of in place. Staff does not typically go through the zoning criteria, but thought it would be helpful in this situation with these 4 applications. Section 2009, I'm sorry, looks like I have a typo, 2009-06 F1 through 4 of the LDC stipulates that the following criteria need to be met prior to a zone change or before a zoning change can be approved. So criteria 1 asks if the requested zone change is justified by a change in conditions since the previous zone classification was established or by an error in the zoning map. Staff finds that the requested zone change is not justified by a change in conditions since the previous zoning classification was established. The original zoning of the property in 2003 via the conditional overlay ordinance 4320 prohibited off-premise advertising on the property and established the intent of the development. Conditional overlays along primary arterials in southwest Fargo, such as 45th Street, 32nd Avenue, and 52nd Avenue, and Veterans Boulevard are common, and all either prohibit or restrict off-premise advertising with commercial zones. These areas were intended for commercial or mixed-use development, and the conditional overlays established design standards for the development. The intent was to not replicate the many off-premise advertising signs that are seen along Main Avenue and University Drive South. 13 off-premise advertising signs have been permitted and constructed since the sign code was adopted. The new sign code was adopted in November of 2011, which suggests that other areas of the city are more appropriate for off-premise advertising outside the corridors that have the existing conditional overlays that prohibit off-premise advertising. Staff finds this criteria has not been met. Criteria 2, which apologies, I don't have it in front of me. I won't touch on that much because that criteria has found to be met and asks about necessary services to the site, which will be similar for the remainder. Criteria 3 asks, will the approval of the zoning change adversely affect the condition or value of the property in the vicinity? The Fargo Sign Code states in part that signs can also threaten the public welfare by creating aesthetic concerns and detriments to property values. Such aesthetic concerns and detriments to the property values are particularly great when an accumulation or proliferation of signs results in visual clutter, or when one or more signs spoil vistas or views, or when one or more signs add or increase commercial or in non-commercial areas. Staff finds that the proposed sign is of a size and scale that could create aesthetic concerns which could lead to injury of property value. As context, the conditional overlays along arterial roadways create a cohesive corridor and gateway approach into the city. GO 2030 designates this area as a walkable mixed-use center, where the conditional overlay seeks to advance design standards for human-scale walkable development. Staff contends the billboard sign is not compatible with the intended development pattern and removes predictability, including for other developers in the surrounding areas that have invested in and could therefore cause injury to other properties within the vicinity. And staff finds that that criteria has not been met. Criteria 4 asks, is the proposed amendment consistent with the purpose of the LDC, the growth plan, and other adopted policies of the city? Section 20-0104 of the LDC states the purpose of the LDC is to implement Fargo's comprehensive plan and related policies in a manner that protects the health, safety, and general welfare of the citizens of Fargo. GO 2030 comprehensive plan targets this area as being a walkable mixed-use center. Walkable mixed-use centers are one of the catalysts identified in the GO 2030 comprehensive plan that are designated to support and advance all of the guiding principles of the plan. Specifically, walkable mixed-use centers have the following principles of development: pedestrian-oriented mixed-use streetscape, a strong pedestrian access point across busy automobile corridors, a walkable block size, building and parking development patterns that create people-oriented spaces and street frontage which encourages a walkable environment, connection to greenways, neighborhood park or other prominent neighborhood feature, and high-quality construction. Continuing on, GO 2030 comprehensive plan identifies 32nd Avenue as an active living street. Active living streets are corridors that prioritize mobility for all modes of travel with an improved streetscape that enhances the quality and visual appearance of neighborhoods. Off-premise advertising would be a detriment to the quality and visual appearance along this corridor. Staff finds that billboard-style off-premise advertising does not align with the principles of development outlined within the GO 2030 comprehensive plan due to the anti-pedestrian nature of such billboards. That this type of signage is intended to grab the attention of the motoring public at a distance at high speeds and does not help create a people-oriented environment or encourage walkability, and staff finds that this criteria is also not satisfied. The map on the right shows the just the area plan of this area, and you can see the subject property is here. And on the left side is an excerpt from GO 2030 where it shows the intended targeted walkable mixed-use center, as well as in orange here is the identification of the active living streets. So with that, staff is recommending denial of this application as criteria has not been met. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Megan. Commissioners, any questions at this time?
Megan, refresh my memory on the one across the street at Urban Plains, and I know we scaled it down and moved it back. What were the circumstances again that one was approved?
Sure. I'll maybe do a little intro and maybe kick it over to Nicole. The one across the street was also part of the original Urban Plains development, was again identified as a mixed-use center. There was a zoning change in 2015 that changed the prohibitions to just a restriction and allowed for conditional use permit review by the Planning Commission for approval. It's my understanding that that sign was approved on a couple of things, a couple of premises that the sign was used as wayfinding for the development. It was to be used as advertising for Shields Arena and businesses of the Urban Plains development, and there was design elements and aesthetics to that specific sign. And I would, I'm not sure if Nicole has anything to add.
Yeah, maybe, I think staff did recommend denial. I think the planning commission supported that. It was appealed to the city commission, tabled at city commission, I think, at one time, and then brought back to city commission with some conditions. So there are some pretty tight designs related to kind of a wayfinding element or a gateway element, kind of this kiosk at the corner. And I think, if I remember correctly, Commissioner Pepcorn found alliance or equivalent factors related to the Fargo Dome and its off-premise signage with the Shields Arena, and that's off-premise signage. So that was the correlation between the two.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we can hear from the applicant at this time. You wish to come up and present?
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Kyle Fryer with Property Resources Group, working with Mike on securing and finding some locations for some outdoor electronic advertising, and we appreciate the opportunity to share this afternoon with you. Some of what I'll share right now will be will apply to all four. Some will be a little bit specific to just the first application that we're looking at here. And so, again, thank you for your time and willingness to hear us out today. First off, as was alluded to by staff, by Megan, this property does fall within an overlay, and while we don't always agree with some of the overlays, we sure appreciate the purpose for the overlays to set some standards, some requirements, and down the road have opportunities like this to visit about those. As she alluded to, I think this one was 2003, so 16 years ago this overlay went into place. 16 years ago, the world changes quite a bit in that amount of time, and so we feel it's appropriate for consideration on a modification, or as it's presented here, I guess, repeal and replacement with that just amendment to the signage being allowed in the new revised overlay from that standpoint. And so while we understand the overlays, we understand their purpose, but we also understand that as the years go on, it's appropriate to relook at them and to revisit them. And as part of that, we'd ask consideration for the change that we have in front of you today. It was already brought up and alluded to with two of the proposed locations, this being one of them. There has already been electronic billboard signs allowed within the corridor. You saw in one of the images the one right across the street in Urban Plains. And I understand there's different circumstances to led to that, but at the same time it's there, it's operating, it's functioning, and we would like the same opportunity that they have been provided across the street from us to comply with the city sign code, and if it needs to go through a conditional use permit similar to what they did, we could review that as well. And we think that's appropriate and fair to have the same opportunity that our neighbors to the north have would be appropriate from our side of it. Three, a lot of the details, as Megan alluded to, get worked out through the actual sign permit and the application for that. Our intention is to have, quality, attractive looking signs and support structures from that standpoint, and that'd be our expectation. We'll have a differing opinion on the impact that it has to neighboring property values and the ability for a neighborhood to be walkable. I think, people walking down the street or in between properties, might want to look at what's on the billboard as much as someone driving by. So I don't think that's a negative or something that prevents the intent of the overlay. And beyond that, just from a walkability standpoint, I mean, these developments, they develop kind of as demand dictates, and you can kind of see we've got some nice developments on both sides of 32nd Avenue, and electronic messaging and electronic billboards can be a nice part of that. So we don't view those as a detractor to value when done right, or being a bad neighbor in any extent. And with the appropriate spacing, which the city side and cone already has, that kind of eliminates some of the fears of, you know, having them all down the line of the street as you go here on every side of the street. And so there's limitations to that which kind of prevent some of that as we go. So I guess for that, I'll kind of wrap it up on this one. I'll have a few more comments on the additional ones as they go, and I'll let Mike share a little bit.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Mike Dragosevich, and thank you for having me. I just want to give you a quick overview of why I'm involved in this. I would like to call myself an extreme Fargo supporter, and I'm very appreciative of Fargo. Actually, my business, Spotlight Media, is a magazine publishing and marketing agency where we basically revolve everything we do around the city of Fargo, and we have magazines called Fargo Monthly and Fargo Inc. And with this appreciation for the community, I've really tried to put a lot of quality into our products as a way to show the pride that we have here. So I'm making this a point because with putting up a digital billboard, it has to meet the standards that I've had with everything else I've done in my company. It has to be quality, it has to represent Fargo and Fargo standards, and it needs to be something that is a benefit to everyone. So I want to make sure that everyone's aware that that's one of the reasons I'm involved. The other reason is business-wise. In the last 18 months, I had a person in my office look at my calendar, and I've charted down 500 meetings with business owners, and I think that's a lot of valuable feedback right here in Fargo, and I get to listen and hear from all the small business owners and what they need and talk business. And in the last year, we've served 300 different businesses, whether it was through marketing, services, website design, advertising. And one of the things that keeps coming up is the need for digital billboard advertising. And one of the reasons is that a lot of the companies would like to advertise within a close proximity of their local business. And if you're a barber shop, you're not going to advertise to people across town because there's other barber shops. So that's where these boards come in to be really handy and very valuable for the businesses. And so just a quick summary of why I'm involved is I see the value of the businesses in the area, seeing these boards, a demand for them. I know that we can make them something that makes the property look great, and there's ways that the boards really feel like part of the design. And then the new technology of the boards are really kind of cool. You can, the clarity and the crisp visuals and the things you can do for display and content is pretty awesome and dynamic, and could be a tool for even cities, and they have been with different types of updates, traffic updates, and the nice thing is they're all could be updated automatically in real time. So again, thanks for letting us be here today, and I just want to give you that overview.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for the applicants? John?
Either one of you, just to clarify something, the sign across the street was used to identify what was going on in, say, the Shields Arena and other things right there. These will be open to essentially anybody that wants to advertise on them. Am I somewhat correct?
Yeah, they would be open for advertisers, as is the one across the street. I mean, the one in Urban Plains, you sit and watch it, it's, the vast majority of it is paid outside advertising.
Okay. All right, just to clarify, and it's not to bring recognition to the
Well, our development will be, the development there, the Blue Water Creek development will be part of that, definitely. Right. But it would be beyond that, just like the one across the street would be. I just wanted to clarify that. Yep. Okay, thank you. You're welcome.
Commissioners?
Could I ask Megan a question?
Yep.
Megan, since that overlay was put in a number of years ago to enhance walkability, has that proven to be the case on 32nd Avenue?
So there's a number of requirements within the conditional overlays, and a majority of them in this area or even across the street have gone through some minor changes over time, but the intent has stayed. And one of the big things is the walkability. There's a whole section that talks about connectivity and sidewalks within the development that connect to public right-of-way, and that can bring you right to the front door and can bring you from front door to front door of other businesses within that development.
Okay, thank you. I'd also like to say that as far as pedestrian walkability, it doesn't seem to me that pedestrians are going to be looking at billboards as a form of entertainment as they're walking down the street. They're designed, as it said in the description, for fast-moving traffic that's going at a high speed, and people are seeing those signs from a distance. In addition, there's a public health part of it, public safety, that goes along with distracted driving. It's been a concern, as we all know, having to do with cell phones and other distractors, but I know that in the past the police departments have had concern over these electronic signs because of the distractibility factor.
Any questions or anything for, okay. Any other questions for the applicants? Okay, at this time we'll open up for public comment. Are there any members of the audience that wish to speak in favor of or in opposition to the application? Okay, seeing none, close the public comment. Commissioners, any discussion, any more questions? Are we ready to act?
Maybe it'd be good to hear all of these since they're all similar. Would that be a possibility?
We were going to vote on them individually, so the similarities, I believe, were covered by Megan, but I'm open, yep. Nicole?
Yeah, I think if you wanted to table the decision, have Megan present, open the public comment for all three, and then vote all together, I mean, one by one, but at the end.
At the same time? Okay.
Consecutively, you could do that if you wanted to, just to
Okay.
confuse things more.
So are there any other variable factors that come in between the comparisons between the cases?
Yeah, I think that your context, locations vary, the staff's points on some of them vary a little bit.
Okay, well,
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't know, from our perspective, we'd be okay with a vote now, and then we'll move on to the next one.
Can I get some guidance, I guess, from Nicole or Mark, please?
I think either way, if, you know, as a, if you want to, I guess if
Would you like to
Commissioner
hear
Stoffren wants to table
Yeah.
this decision and then move on and then come back to it, or you can, if someone's ready to make a motion, they could do that as well.
Do I need a motion to table it, as this is the item?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Well, I move to defer action on this until after we've heard all three.
Perfect. Is there a second?
I second.
All
There's
four.
a second. Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Can I do a voice call vote on this? Yep. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay. Thank you, Scott. We'll hear this next one.
Item 4 is Bentley Place First Edition, originally noticed as Bentley Place First Edition and Bentley Place Second Edition. There was originally an application on this property, but the applicant has since withdrawn since the original application due to spacing requirements of the existing billboard to the north. So it is just specific to this one property. This application is located at Lot 4, Block 1, Bentley Place First Edition, located at 5570 32nd Avenue South. The application, currently the conditional overlay on the property prohibits off-premise advertising, and the applicant has requested to remove this requirement in order to allow the off-premise advertising. A little bit of context, this is just east of the intersection of Veterans Boulevard and 32nd Avenue. Just west of Veterans Boulevard is the city of West Fargo with commercial development, and there is some residential a bit north of this area. Here shows the location on the proposed Lot 4. The applicant proposes a 25-foot tall, 300 square foot digital billboard that has a 300 square foot billboard that has a digital face on the east side and a static face on the west side. Image submitted by the applicant shows the context of a pedestrian, as well as the sign just kind of placed where it would be located. A lot of the findings within the criteria are very similar, so I won't read everything again. I'll just kind of hit the highlights, and I have bolded things that are specific to that particular application if it's different. So I will read through those specifically. The first criteria here are similar. Staff has found that they're not satisfied, but found that the requested zone change is not justified, as this area was also part of the original conditional overlay of urban plains that was established in 2003. Conditional overlays along the primary arterials restrict the off-premise advertising, and the intent is not to replicate the many off-premise advertising billboards along Main Avenue and University Drive South. And 13 off-premise advertising signs have been permitted and constructed since the new sign code was adopted in 2011 that suggests other areas are more appropriate in the city of Fargo for off-premise advertising, and staff finds the criteria has not been met. Criteria 2 has been found to be met. Criteria 3, this is a little bit different based on proximity. So criteria 3 asks, will the approval of the zoning change adversely affect the condition or value of the property in the vicinity? The sign is in proximity of Veterans Boulevard, which across the street to the west is the city of West Fargo. In West Fargo, off-premise advertising is prohibited by the zoning of the property and is not permitted outside of heavy commercial, light industrial, or heavy industrial zoning districts. This area of Veterans Boulevard is not zoned to allow off-premise advertising and is unlikely to in the future, as this is beginning to be filled with development. Allowing off-premise advertising in this location could cause injury to the property value of those located in West Fargo along Veterans Boulevard. West Fargo could also become more competitive and attractive to the type of development style that Fargo desires if off-premise billboards were permitted in the conditional overlay zoning ordinance. To date, staff has received 2 phone calls and 2 written comments from representatives of properties adjacent or near the subject property. The callers state concern for the impact of the billboards that the billboards could have on the visibility of their property and their future development. The 2 written comments were attached to the staff report, and I believe one is here today. One representation of one property is here today. The other 3 bullet points here are similar to the last, in stating that the Fargo sign code notes that signs can threaten the public welfare by creating aesthetic concerns and detriments to property values. The sign is of a size and scale that could create aesthetic concerns, which could lead to the injury of property values. And Code 2030 designates this area as a walkable mixed-use center that seeks to advance design standards for human-scale walkable development. Criteria is found to not be satisfied. Criteria 4, I believe these are similar as the last application as well. The purpose of the LDC is to implement Fargo's comprehensive plan and related policies in a manner that protects the health, safety, and general welfare of the citizens of Fargo. The comprehensive plan targets this area as being a walkable mixed-use center, with the items 1 through 7 noted here, similar as the last. Go 2030 comprehensive plan identifies 32nd Avenue as well as Veterans Boulevard as an active living street, which are key corridors that prioritize mobility for all modes of travel and improve streetscape that enhances the quality and visual appearance. And staff finds that the billboard style off-premise advertising does not align with the principles of the development outlined in Go 2030 due to the anti-pedestrian nature of the development or of the billboards, so the criteria is found to not be satisfied. Here's again the same map you have seen as the other application, and we would be located right kind of in this area here where you can see orange notes the active living streets identification from Go 2030. Staff finds that criteria have not been met and is recommending denial of this application. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Megan. Any questions on application for Megan? Okay, any additional comments from the applicant?
Just a couple, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. This one, very similar to the previous one, same original overlay, same neighboring Urban Plains sign across the street that's already set some of the precedent here from that side of it. I know the folks from Capital Credit Union will have their opportunity to speak, so we'll let them do that. The other objection, not that it matters, but their objection was the withdrawn lot, not this lot. We've had conversations with them, but we'll let Capital Credit Union speak from that side of it. You know, a couple things, you know, the addition on this one with the veterans aspect of it and some of the staff comments on that. You know, again, some of that's conjecture, opinion on, you know, the more desirable to be on the West Fargo versus the Fargo side because of an electronic sign. This is the business we're in at Property Resources Group, and we haven't seen that by any means when you have these opportunities for these signs from that side of it. So could it happen if done poorly and you had a whole line of them? Yeah, potentially, but that's not what we're discussing here from that side when you look at the West Fargo side and the comparability of that and that kind of opinion or speculation from that side of it. Also, just comment back to a previous comment about, you know, the distracted potential, the distractions that the potential signs propose. One, the studies don't show that, as Commissioner Morgan referenced. You know, your cell phones, you know, I don't know what the numbers are, but multiple times more likely to create an issue than anything else going on around while you're driving from that side of it. And that, you know, as far as any sort of traffic has the ability to view and you know, see what is on the board at any given time from that side. So anyway, that was kind of just a couple additional thoughts and comments specific to this site. And again, kind of, you know, we've got zero intention of being a bad neighbor to anyone. We've got interest from our side of it in that corner and that whole development doing well. We still have existing property adjoining this that will be developed out over the coming years. And so we've got similar motivations to everyone in that area, existing to be built or people that aren't even on the drawing board yet on land that we currently own. So thank you.
Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? Kyle, could you just speak to the purpose of having one side static and one side digital? You mentioned that in the last one as well.
It's based on traffic patterns. In this case, on this side, the west base would be the digital side, which would be the side where you'd have the traffic light. The other traffic would be coming by and not stopped at any given time. So it makes more sense to have the digital side facing the stoplight is the typical. There are times, and this may be one of them, but that's not what we're discussing at this time, where you'd have both sides be digital. But that's kind of the rationale behind that.
Yeah, just was curious. Yep, Commissioner Stoffern.
Megan, would there be anything that restricted changing that from a static side and a digital side after this is approved, once it goes in? If they wanted to switch to a digital, they could?
That's correct. Yep, as long as the spacing requirements were met. Yep.
Very good.
Commissioners, any other questions for the applicant?
Just comment real quick. Just to clarify, to make sure we understand the difference of boards. So the boards we're talking about are meant to rotate every 8 seconds and appeal to people who are stopped and they have the time to look at it, compared to some of the other types of advertising boards that scroll text, or they have the, you know, shiny movement. We actually have to serve a static image for a certain amount of time, 8 seconds, and then rotate to the next one. Just wanted to make sure that everybody's clear of the differences, because there's a lot of boards out there and they fall under different, there's a couple of them that are still out there around town which are really distracting, but they would fall in a different code. For instance, the one on University where it kind of divides off there on 13th, and there's that that board right on the corner that has all the stock scrolling and all sorts of stuff happening. Well, this type of board that we would do would be content that does not move, and it actually works well with people standing around. They could see it and observe it, but just want to make sure everyone was clear with that.
Thank you. Commissioners, further questions? Okay, if not, we'll open it up for public comment. Are there any members of the audience that wish to speak in favor of or in opposition to the application?
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Jordan Weir, and I'm an attorney with the Vogel Law Firm. I represent Capital Credit Union. I've corresponded and spoken with staff, and Megan in particular. With me today, I have the President and CEO of Capital Credit Union, Vance Reinbold, who's also corresponded directly with Megan and wrote the written protest as part of your packets. He came all the way from Bismarck today, so obviously very interested and concerned with this proposal. I'm going to step aside for him to make a few comments, and then I'll come back to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the time. My name is Vance Reinbold, and I'm the President and CEO of Capital Credit Union. As stated in my letter, I'm here today to represent Capital Credit Union in our interest in opposition to the proposed repeal and reestablishment of the conditional overlay in the Bentley First Edition. As stated in our letter of opposition, we made a significant investment in our Lot 3, Block 1 of this edition. That is the biggest concern I have, is that we purchased this lot about 2 years ago without this requested conditional overlay present at the time. We did it knowing that, and that was a big reason why we did buy this lot. We feel strongly that if this zoning change is approved, that both the value and visibility of our lot and investment would be adversely impacted. Today I'm asking for you to follow through and accept the recommendations of staff. That's the position that we have taken as well. So thank you for your time, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you.
Just to add on to what Vance has already said, and not to belabor any of the points, but also wanting to respond to some of the comments made here today. Number one, just as far as the chronology and just for a visual aspect, my client, Capital Credit Union, purchased the lot on the very corner of Veterans and 32nd Avenue South just 2 years ago. At that time, the plat was actually replatted, conditional overlay reestablished. So the conditional overlay we're actually discussing is from 2017. And I'd actually propose respectfully that to have a conditional overlay in place that prohibits these kinds of signage for as long as it's been in place is actually a reason why this commission should follow through and deny the application. There's a long history of this. There's a very good reasoning for comprehensive planning. The entire comprehensive plan we have here contemplates 2030, so we have a lot in the future to consider. And I'd respectfully, strongly disagree with the comment that we just need to change with the times. There's a reason for comprehensive planning, and just when you have changing times doesn't mean that the plan itself should change. That would result in and undermine and contradict the entire purposes of a comprehensive plan, like a city like with the stature of Fargo. The staff's suggestions were thorough, their examination was thorough, and their analysis is correct. The LDC requires that all 4 criteria be met. 3 of the 4 are not met. For that reason, a loan should be denied. As indicated, there's a protest in writing by not only my client, but another adjacent property owner affected by the conditional overlay. I've done the math. Someone can check my math. But with that written protest that is not withdrawn, I confirmed with John Eunice of the Eagle Ridge Development, they've not withdrawn their written protest. With written protest provided to the governing body of 20% of the surface area of the affected property, there needs to be a supermajority 3/4 vote to change a regulation. And we again would respectfully request that it be denied. Finally, I wanted to hint on the idea that there has been a precedent established. The direct comments in the history of establishing this plan is to avoid what has come to pass in Main Avenue and University. There is already a proposal for a half dozen billboards. And while I'd respectfully ask where it would end. Would it be with a 6? Would it be with another 10? Would some other applicants come by because they see a lucrative idea for advertising? One has been put in place. There were very tight restrictions. The aesthetics of that particular billboard are much different, and they look a lot different for the billboard at Urban Plains Center than have been proposed for these particular billboards in question. And so just merely because one billboard has been constructed along with the initial planning itself, that does not in itself set a precedent, and beyond that, I'm not sure where the proposals would stop if we see that all we need to do is come forward with an application. So with that, both Vance and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the audience that wish to speak on this matter? Okay, seeing none, we will close the public comment. Commissioners, any other questions or discussion? Or would you like to make a motion?
Move to defer.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Okay. Megan, back to you.
Item 5 is Timber Parkway 3rd Edition. It's an application for a zoning change to repeal and reestablish a conditional overlay. The property is lots 3 and 4, Block 1, Timber Parkway 3rd Edition, located at 4801 and 5071 Timber Parkway South. Currently, the conditional overlay on both properties prohibit off-premise advertising, and the applicant has requested to remove this requirement in order to allow off-premise advertising. The Timber Creek development is located at the northeast corner of I-29 and 52nd Avenue South. You can see in the aerial imagery there's some development happening here. There's some residential here to the north, as well as the city of Frontier here to the south, and commercial development across the street. The applicant proposes a 40-foot tall sign, a 300-square-foot billboard adjacent to I-29 with 2 digital sides facing north and south. Note that the application and the materials here show a 300-square-foot sign. However, a sign as large as 672 square feet would be permitted or allowed here adjacent to Interstate. Additionally, note that the applicant is proposing 1 billboard currently adjacent to the Interstate. However, if spacing of off-premise advertising allows, additional billboards may be located along 52nd Avenue along this property, or even perhaps Timber Parkway South. So here is an image submitted by the applicant showing the sign in context to a person, and as image submitted by the applicant as well, showing the sign where it would sit. The criteria here is very similar as the last 2, so I think if that's all right with you, unless there's any specific questions, I'll maybe just hit on what is a little bit different with this application versus the other 2. Staff finds that the first criteria is a request zoning change justified by a change in conditions since the previous zoning classification was established, or by an error in the zoning map. And for the reasons listed and noted as previously, criteria is not found. Criteria has not been satisfied. Criteria 3, will the approval of the zoning change adversely affect the condition or value of the property in the vicinity? There's a little bit difference here on the 3rd bullet down. You'll see that the area in which the sign would be located is a walkable mixed-use development and located within an existing conditional overlay. Timber Creek itself is not identified, or was not identified, as a walkable mixed-use center in GO 2030. However, it has developed in that way. And criteria 4 is the proposed amendment. Oh, I apologize. Criteria 3 has found to not be satisfied. And criteria 4 is the proposed amendment consistent with the purpose of the LDC, the growth plan, and other adopted policies of the city. The bold just notes that little bit of a difference versus the last two that you've heard, that the Timber Creek development is not specifically identified as a walkable mixed-use center, but has developed in that way and has a number of similar principles as listed 1, 4, 6, and 7. And criteria has found to not be satisfied for 4 as well. As with the others, here's the image of the growth plan on the right, the 2 properties here, as well as an excerpt from Go 2030 that shows the extent of the walkable mixed-use center and its adjacency, and then also shows that 52nd Avenue is identified as an active living street. So staff has found that the criteria have not been met and is recommending denial of the application. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, Rocky.
Thanks, Megan. I just have a question. So it seems like this one's a little bit different because of proposal to be on the interstate. So it seems like they're at a little bit of a loss because lot 4 is so large. And it seems like in practice of things as we go forward that lot would get broken up in some shape or form as development happened. And I don't know how the others on the commission feel, but I felt like if that was broken up into a specific lot along the interstate, I'd feel differently about it than allowing it anywhere on that, on lot 4 there. But I just thought I'd comment on that because you pointed that out and how it could still be on 52nd, and that sort of changed my mind on it. Maybe just a comment for the applicant too.
Commissioners, any other questions for Megan?
Given the question from Rocky, is there any way that it could be limited to that location within this lot?
There's probably a number of ways that could happen. I'll maybe defer to Nicole.
Yeah, I mean, I think with any of these, you could put conditions on them, and so you could make some conditional comments. I would comment that it's, you don't know if additional residential is going to be built there or what's going to be built on that empty vacant lot right now. And so, and then across the street and throughout that neighborhood, it's been fairly, through all the public meetings as part of that development, it's been encouraged to stay somewhat residential as much as possible.
Commissioners, other questions or discussion? Okay, if not, we'll hear from the applicant.
Thank you. As alluded to already and discussed already, this little different feel to it due to the nature of this sign being an interstate driven sign compared to the other ones we discussed. We would be open to that, you know, if there's a way to restrict that to being located along the interstate corridor versus the 52nd Avenue corridor for this one. That is our intent, and we would be agreeable to that in whatever way, shape, or form that could flow from this side of things as we move forward here. So other than that, I think a lot of the similar comments are the same to what I've made in the past. You know, some of the overlay aspects of it, you know, I think make less impact on this given the desired location of the sign and the intended traffic patterns to the side and its impact on other things, the walkability and other ways, looking at this development in this area here. We own the land around it. We own the apartments to the north. I mean, we're, from that standpoint, we are our own neighbors as we look at this one at this point in time. So I'd be willing to answer any questions that anyone has.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? Yep.
I just have a quick question. When you talked about the apartments to the north, and on the image that you have that shows the complex with the billboard on there, have you thought at all about how a digital sign and the light being on 24 hours a day is going to impact the residents on that top floor?
Yeah, it's minimal. I mean, it wouldn't be any substantially different than some of the traffic going by, and it's just part of where how it works, I guess, from that side of it. We don't expect substantial impact from that. What we've seen and what our research has shown.
Okay.
It's really only the one building, and it's not angled directly to impact that.
Can I ask how far it is from the apartment complex?
I don't have that off the top of my head. I apologize.
If you have your packets in front of you on either the zoning map or probably it's easier to see on the aerial imagery, up in that northwest corner is where it's proposed, and there is a little bar at the bottom of that sheet that shows what 300 feet is. So you can see that it's within 300 feet of or pretty close to that first apartment building there.
Commissioners, yep.
Question for Megan. Frontier being right across the road and being there in this Frontier, actually, they don't fall in our ET, right? So there's quite a few billboards in Frontier along the interstate, if I remember right. So, and any other place along the interstate where there isn't an overlay, to put a sign along the interstate, how difficult is it?
So there are certain requirements in the sign code. It has to be in a certain zoning district, and then spacing requirements between existing billboards need to be met, as well as sensitive areas as outlined in the sign code. And some of those sensitive areas include spacing from residential uses, PI zoning districts, and that is measured along the same side or of the property line of where the sign is located.
You are correct. Frontier has multiple, one being an electronic one on the south side of the interchange.
Commissioners, yep.
Megan, so noting what the distance requirements might be for signage next to residential here, is that location within, does it violate those standards or not?
It does not, as the way the sign is measured. And so the sign is measured on the same side of the road. It's not measured like in a radius or across the street. So the zoning would need to be residential on that same side of the road to not meet spacing requirements. So as it sits, since it's across the street, spacing requirements would be met here. One wouldn't be allowed across the street here because it would be located in an MR zoning district. But
I see.
Commissioners, any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. We'll open it up for public comment. Are there any members of the audience that wish to speak in favor of or in opposition to this application? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Commissioners?
Move to defer.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, next.
Item 6 is Timber Creek 8th Edition, an application for a zoning change to repeal and reestablish a conditional overlay. The property is located, there is Lot 2, Block 1, Timber Creek 8th Edition, and is located at 5131 Prosperity Way South. The current conditional overlay does not allow for off-premise advertising, and the applicant has requested to remove that prohibition in order to allow the off-premise advertising. The property is just northeast of the intersection of Timber Parkway South and 52nd Avenue South within a commercial development. As you can see, under construction, a majority here on the same side of the street has been constructed, is vacant here on the west side of the street, proximity to Frontier, as well as commercial development on the south. You can see here, image submitted by the applicant. The sign is proposed a little bit back from 52nd Avenue. There are some easements here that front that would not permit the sign. The applicant proposes a 35-foot tall sign, 300 square foot, face two digital sides facing east and west adjacent to 52nd Avenue South. Again, images submitted by the applicant here. This sign shown to the right is the current sign, on-premise sign for Dairy Queen, which you can see here. Also submitted by the applicant, and then from view from 52nd Avenue South. I'll just read the criteria. I don't believe there's any changes, or maybe just very slight, between this one and the last one. Criteria 1 is the requested zone change justified by a change in conditions since the previous zoning classification was established, or by an error in the zoning map. For the reasons listed previously, the criteria has not been satisfied. Criteria 3, will the approval of the zoning change adversely affect the condition or value of the property in the vicinity? The note here is that, again, it is not a targeted walkable mixed-use center in GO 2030, but has developed in that way. Criteria has not been satisfied. And criteria 4, is the proposed amendment consistent with the purpose of the LDC, the growth plan, and other adopted policies of the city? Same comment here as the last, that the Timber Creek development is not specifically identified, but has developed as a walkable mixed-use center, and notes some principles outlined within GO 2030. And this criteria has found to not be satisfied. Again, our maps showing in the growth plan the property, as well as the excerpt from GO 2030. We're about right here, probably about right here. And again, active living street noted in orange here from GO 2030. And staff finds that criteria has not been met and is recommending denial of the application. Be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thanks, Megan. Commissioners, any questions on this one?
Did you receive any questions or concerns from any of the businesses in that area, or?
Staff did not get any other inquiries on the applications other than what was included in your packet as part of the Bentley application.
Any other questions, commissioners? Hearing none, we'll hear from the applicant. If you have anything to add.
Real short. Nothing substantial. Just again, we're respectfully will disagree on some of the application and interpretation of the criteria that, and how it's being looked at. Just leave it at that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? Yep.
I have a question with regard to these digital signs. When you, when night occurs, does the power go down in terms of how much light is projected out of these at all? Does it change daylight to nighttime?
Yes, it does automatically have, they've got light readers on them. That's not the technical term, but, and they will adjust accordingly depending on the time of day. And the amount of light that there currently is.
As you can imagine, we'll be working with Daktronics, which is a pretty large organization, and they are dealing with a lot of meetings like this and a lot of those concerns. So it's exciting to see all the different technology that they are putting into place. Every year that helps with safety concerns and light and energy and all that kind of stuff.
Commissioners, any other questions for the applicant? Seeing none, we'll open it up for public comment. Are there any members of the audience that wish to speak in favor of or in opposition to this application? Seeing none, commissioners, what say you?
I can't defer this.
Yes, John?
I'd like to make the motion to separate number 5 from the other ones.
We'll
and
vote on them all separately, actually.
Oh, we are going to vote on
Yep.
them all separately?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I thought we were voting on that group.
For this one, I'll make the motion recommended by staff.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Any discussion, commissioners? Okay, we'll take a voice vote, please. Roll call vote, I'm sorry, please.
Holt,
Aye.
Sobolik,
Aye.
McGilkey,
Aye.
Gunkelman,
Aye.
Sherling,
Yes.
Morgan,
Aye.
Schneider,
Aye.
Stofferen,
Aye.
Tasa,
Aye.
Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye. Motion is carried. Let's go back to the beginning and look at item, again, the Blue Water Creek Third Edition. Is there any discussion on this one? Are we ready to act? Yep.
So, Madam Chair, I appreciate that we tabled these and went through them all together. I think that really enlightened the conversation. And I will just say, we've had a conversation about the sign code, about the overlay, about Go 2030, and all of those processes took several years to go through. They were very intentional, very thoughtful, very strategic. They were not done on an arbitrary basis. They were put in place for a reason. And when I was on the city commission when the sign issue came up for Shields Arena, and there was an exception made because it was an arena and it was supposed to be promoting their events. If that's not happening and they're selling off-premise advertising, that's an issue that needs to be looked at and addressed because they're not meeting the criteria that was approved. But what that did was open up and set a precedent for these applications coming forward. And I think one of the things we learned through that process, and I did not support the exception, we put these plans in place to be walkable communities for a reason. We had committee members work on a sign code for years for a reason. And I would just ask this commission to uphold all of the work that we have done because it has been intentional and thoughtful.
Thank you.
Is that a motion?
With that, I will move the staff recommendation to deny the repeal on item 3.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote, please.
Schneider,
Aye.
Sobolik,
Aye.
Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Sherling,
Yes.
Stofferen,
Yes.
Tasa,
Aye.
Holt,
Aye.
McGilkey,
Aye.
Gunkelman,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye, motion is carried.
I move to deny number 4.
Okay, on to item number 4. We have so you are supporting the recommended motion?
Yep.
Okay, if there's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Any discussion?
I think this one more than others is just the fact that, it's neighboring West Fargo. West Fargo is not going into this area. They're staying with their existing prohibitions. I think it would be real bad. Plus, the idea that we got businesses there that expected their signage to have prominence, and it would detract. I have no doubt about that. So not necessarily, I don't know about property values, but it certainly detract from their visibility of their own images. So I would think it would be a good idea to deny this one.
So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Sherling,
Yes.
Gunkelman,
Aye.
Sobolik,
Aye.
Stofferen,
Aye.
Holt,
Aye.
McGilkey,
Aye.
Tasa,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Schneider,
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye, motion is carried. Last item on this is item number 5. Yep.
So I think this one's different if we can find a way to make it work. And I could come up with a motion, but I'm not sure it would be sufficient enough to do what I'd like it to do. And so I guess I'd ask for staff help on this, or unless the commission wants to overrule me, feel like if it's somehow adjacent to the interstate in some capacity, and maybe there's a setback from the residential structure as well, I feel like I would be supportive of it. So I don't know if there's maybe Eric can help me with some legal language to do that and make a motion. That would be my suggested motion.
Nicole?
Maybe a couple thoughts too, not to see if this would dissuade you or not, but there's really no way to protect a billboard from the spacing of that in our current codes with the apartments to the north. Under our old sign code in pre-2009, that would have been prohibitive based on the proximity to the multifamily, but with the addition and changes to the sign code, that was removed. I guess my concern, our staff's concern, and maybe didn't come out very clearly in the staff presentation, is the fact that that property is vacant, and we really don't know what that projected land use will be. The intention, going back to Commissioner Sobolik's points of some of our long-range planning efforts, I mean, we had probably 500 person attendance in some of these public meetings as part of this land. And we have residential properties in very near proximity, 500,000 plus, that are buying property with the intention of value here. So if there is a consideration for approving this or looking at conditions, I would ask, respectfully request a table so we could thoroughly reach out to the residential neighborhood in proximity to that. Also, in the history of Go 2030 is very a common comment about the gateways in our city, and we have yet to allow a digital billboard under the new codes along our interstate that are at the 672 square feet. And so I would just want to look at that in comparison with, again, our intentions originally.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess I'm okay with staff working on it a little bit. I would say that, you know, on this one though, I mean, it's a large property and there's some property owners' rights, and it's a very large lot that feels like you could probably accommodate something if we could make it work. I mean, it's some way they have the ability to do that, and it's along an interstate. It's not much different. I think staff was recommending denial on previous application along the interstate interchanges, where in the northeast quadrant we had an apartment go right in next to a billboard, right where the billboard fell down a couple weeks ago. But other than that, we approved it then, and so I guess I'll make a motion to table in an effort that staff and the applicant can work out sufficient guidelines to come back to us.
There's a motion to table. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
There's a second.
Mr. Chair, or
Yep.
Madam Chair, and Commissioner Schneider, do you want that to the next table, really to the next meeting?
To the next meeting,
so
yeah.
You don't have to re-notice it?
Sure.
So
And it's
the
not a
next
commissioner
regularly
staff
scheduled planning
prefer-
commission meeting, I assume, is what the motion is.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Commissioner McGelkey, is that okay?
Second.
Any discussion on this motion? Yep, Commissioner
Madam
Sobolik.
Chair, I would just ask that the staff look at rental rights as well. We did hear that the applicant is the owner of the apartment complex, so when you talk about landowner rights, we need to make sure that those renters have a say as well, because they will get some light because of that.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, we will take a roll vote, please.
Bachmeyer?
Aye.
Gunkelman?
Aye.
McGelkey?
Aye.
Morgan?
No.
Schurling?
Yes.
Schneider?
Aye.
Sobolik?
No.
Holtz?
No.
Stofferin?
Yes.
Tassa?
Aye.
Hey, Scott?
But I think that's where,
Really been running.
Yeah.
yeah, hit it off.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We will continue on with item number 8, the Fred C. Hay petition. This one will be presented to us by Donald Kress.
Wait for Commissioner Morgan to be seated. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Donald Kress, the Department of Planning and Development, with the Fred C. Hagan Addition Zone Change. I'm going to go to the location map here first. You all know where this is here. This is St. John's Hospital. This is 2nd Street, 4th Street, and this area is the Dike East and West parks. Plus, we have a lift station here. There's parking for the community theater. The skate park is in here, and there are several properties, as you see here. These are owned, they're all owned either by the Fargo Park District or the City of Fargo. This is the City of Fargo, one up here. There are a couple smaller pieces here that are they're indicated as stated in your staff report as zoning unknown there. We take that to be as zoned as agricultural. This is all left over, if commissioners may be aware, this part here was once part of Minnesota, and the river was rerouted in 1962, I believe, to go over here. And so this was added to North Dakota probably because the river was lapping away at 4th Street, I'm guessing is what happened there. And as you see on the zoning map here, this area is zoned SR2, single dwelling residential, although obviously with the flood control and the dike and so on, this can never be developed as a single family residential zone. And so at the request of the Park District, represented here by Mr. Dave Leaker, they submitted an application to change their piece here to PI, public and institutional, which is the appropriate zoning for a project like this. And then the city of Fargo, we added our parcel to this, and then these other parcels here that are on the other side of this one's on the other side of the dike. This is a former, this is also a city-owned parcel here. Added these to just get this whole thing to one zoning here. And as stated in your staff report, we're asking that we put a conditional overlay on it to restrict it to the uses that are already there, which are parks, safety services, and city-owned things like the lift station up there, outdoor recreation and parking. And so to add to this, you commissioners may recall that recently we adopted the Downtown in Focus plan. And the Downtown in Focus plan, now we have finally a land use plan for downtown here. And this is also in your staff report here. We see the subject property here, and the future land use here is parks and recreation. So this zone change supports and reinforces the land use designation as stated in the Downtown in Focus plan. So again, a fairly straightforward zone change here with the conditional overlay. Again, Mr. Leaker is here from the Park District. And the recommendation is stated in your staff report and shown on the screen. That concludes staff's presentation, commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. Commissioners, any questions for Donald?
I have one question.
Yep.
Donald, does this allow any additional uses on the wet side for as far as activities or events, or give any more flexibility to that sort of thing?
Again, Commissioner, we looked at the uses that are there. So that's a park, that's under parks. So it doesn't specifically grant or deny any particular use on the wet side.
Commissioners, any other questions for Donald?
One more.
Yep.
Donald, the rest of the land, or for Mr. Leaker, the rest of the land all the way along down to the water plant, I take it right now that, is that under your, because there's a bike path?
Yeah, those are some mixed properties between the Park District and the city of Fargo. We maintain it as a park and a trail system.
Okay.
All the way down to Lindenwood.
Okay, but there's no reason that was left out of this, or I just...
Commissioner, this was just area was particularly requested by the Park District. We've looked at all along the Red River from Trollwood through Edgewood all the way on down. There are various properties are owned by the park and the city, with some of them are zoned residential, some of them are zoned PI. They were just not requested at this time, sir.
And one more question, does this restrict at all what the city, like they've got the 2 lift stations now up in the north end of this, does this restrict at all if the city of Fargo needs to do anything else there?
It shouldn't, because the broad category of safety services, I think we take the things the city needs to do to protect the city.
Okay.
I believe that's an appropriate interpretation of that term.
Thank you.
Mark? Nope. Good. Okay. Mm-hmm.
What are the parameters of downtown if this area is in downtown neighborhood?
Well, I'll tell you, ma'am, I'm just going to refer to this. This was the future land use plan that's in the Downtown in Focus. I believe the dotted line, as we see here, counts as downtown, so it looks like we're running right just on the 6th Avenue side, just so we're in the very southeast corner of that, ma'am. That's what that map would indicate.
Okay, and then it goes over to University, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. It follows this line here, goes around up, and then over, looks like up here, down, and then gets in there, I guess, and down the river. Oh, sorry.
I'd like to also ask about the Fred Hagen addition. What is the history of it as being residential as Fred Hagen addition?
As I understand it, and I don't have that documentation in front of me, when this was in Minnesota, it was maybe something else. Ever since it's been in Fargo, I think it has always been a open and flood control area. I don't believe it was ever a residential zone.
Okay, the reason I ask is I know who Fred Hagen is.
Right. I believe he's still alive, too.
He is. And so that's why I was wondering how his name got attached to this
I believe he was a city commissioner or commissioner at the time.
Eric, do you know?
Yeah, I think he was the city commissioner there in the old city hall. There was a plaque commemorating his term. It's upstairs now. His son, I mean, I think this Fred C. Hagen died long ago, and his son, I just looked up his obituary because I was kind of curious myself, and he died a few years ago. Grandson's still living in town, however.
Both of them then, two of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Both of them were Fred.
Yeah, okay.
Commissioners, any other questions for Donald at this time? If not, we'll throw it over to, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, yeah.
Nothing else? Okay, sorry. Dave, anything to add?
No, I think we're just, as Donald said, we're just trying to clean some things up down here, so.
Perfect. Commissioners, any questions? Okay, we'll open up for public comment. Are there any members of the audience that wish to speak in favor of or in opposition to the application? We'll close the public comment. Commissioners, ready to act? Yep.
Madam Chair, I'll offer the motion as included in the staff report.
Okay. Second. There's a second. Any discussion on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Tossa.
Aye.
Stoffren.
Aye.
McGilkey.
Aye.
Sobelik.
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye.
Sherling.
Yes.
Morgan.
Yes.
Holtz.
Aye.
Gunkelman.
Aye.
Bachmeyer.
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye. Motion is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. On to item number 9, Roberts edition. Donald?
Again, Commissioners, this, we'll go to the location map here first. This is an alley vacation, which is going to take place. This is 2nd Avenue North here, Robert Street, 1st Avenue North, Broadway, the Black Building, the Skyway. This area, as you see, is, if you've been down there, is already under construction. There's construction going on here. The intent of the applicant, Kilbourne Group, today represented here by Mr. Mike Zimney, is to build a mixed-use building all across this whole area here. And to do so, there's a public right-of-way, an alley here that is not really in use, but they need to clean that off there, and they do that through the vacation process. The vacation public right-of-way process is stated in the North Dakota Century Code. You'll notice in your packet that the usual lengthy LDC findings are not included. They are findings from the North Dakota Century Code, because that's a process that we just take out straight out of the code. And then this goes to the City Commission in a little different way after it goes to your commission and is voted on there for final approval. And again, just it's a piece of alley. The Kilbourne is the major property owner here, and they are also working with Mr. Swanson, who's also involved in the property ownership there. Again, the zoning here is DMU, downtown mixed use, so the mixed use building fits right into that. And again, we can cite our downtown in focus plan that shows that this alley to be vacated here is again in the mixed use area, so again reinforcing the land use designation for this. There's no zone change involved in this. This is just cleaning up the public right of way, but again it fits right into the plan as stated there. And pretty straightforward vacation of alley. Again, Mr. Zimney is here if you have any questions on this project. Staff's recommendation is stated in the staff report and shown on the screen. That concludes staff's presentation. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Donald? Okay. Seeing none. Mike, anything to add? Or okay. Any questions for the applicant, commissioners? Yep. Brenda?
I'd just like to make one comment. There are private utilities in there, so there are no public utilities, but we are working with the developer to get those relocated. So it's going to be kind of a chicken and egg thing of what comes first and how we move those along and get those utilities relocated.
Commissioners, any questions at this time? Now we'll open up public comment. Any members of the audience that wish to speak in favor of or in opposition to the application? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment. Commissioners, questions? We ready to act?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the findings and recommendations of staff and move to recommend the approval to the City Commission.
Is there a second? Second. There's a second. Any discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Morgan.
Aye.
McGilkey.
Aye.
Holtz.
Aye.
Sherling.
Yes.
Gunkelman.
Aye.
Sobolek.
Aye.
Tassa.
Aye.
Bachmeyer.
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye.
Stoffren.
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye, motion is carried. Thank you, Donald.
Thank you, ma'am, and commissioners.
So that concludes the public hearing items, but we do have another item presented by Jim.
Thank you, Nick. Good afternoon. Commissioner Grinberg thought you would be interested in this and asked that I add this to the agenda. This doesn't require any planning commission review. However, it will be reviewed by the planning department just within our site planning process later. The site is the former site of the Park East apartment buildings. This was acquired for a flood protection project a couple years ago. The city has already constructed a levee kind of adjacent to the river, and what we had was about 54,000 square feet of property that was a remnant that was not needed for the flood control project. And so what we're doing is going out for development proposals to get some development come in on this remainder of the property. You've been by the site. There was a dike, I believe, constructed last year. If you go by there today, there's a big crane there, and they're constructing a lift station. That'll all be done by the end of July. And so the actual development of this property would start this fall at the earliest. The property is zoned downtown mixed use. Again, there'll be a site plan review through the planning department to make sure it's compliant with the land development code. Unless they need some sort of a planned unit development, this wouldn't require your review. The finance committee is taking it upon itself to review these proposals. Mayor Mahoney and Deputy Mayor Dave Pepcorn both serve on that committee, and so they'll be looking at a variety of criteria such as the quality of the development, how soon it can get done, what type of incentives are needed, et cetera. I believe all the proposals have will request Renaissance Zone incentives, and so that will also be reviewed by the Renaissance Zone Authority. So I think what I'll do is just kind of briefly describe each of these proposals. The first one was from Beyond Shelter. Beyond Shelter is proposing a 6-story building plus a loft. There'd be 9,800 square feet of commercial space, 51 affordable housing units for seniors, 10 market rate apartments, and 7 condominiums. There would be 84 enclosed parking spaces. In addition, there'd be 31 exterior parking spaces. They'd have to work out to get access on the main avenue. The estimated cost of this development would be about $29 million, including a lot of soft costs. Their proposed timeline would be to start in the fall of 2020 with completion by the end of the December of 2021. So that proposal tied to that particular site. You can kind of see this image from the air. You can kind of see where that dike is located on the property. The second proposal is from Enclave and the Gateway Center. The Gateway Center is that commercial development that includes the frying pan, I believe this perspective would be as you would come into Fargo from Minnesota. You can see the design here. This looks more back towards the east. And this is an overhead image. Because the Gateway Center is next door, what they would do is actually incorporate a portion of that property that they own into this development. The Gateway, this would be a 5-story building plus underground parking. There'd be 14,000 square feet of commercial space. Within the new building, they would actually take out some existing commercial space. There's a building kind of on the east side of the property, and that would be removed in order to get a larger footprint for the building. There'd be 122 residential units, 202 indoor parking spaces. There'd be some other parking outdoors within their current site. There's extensive rooftop amenities, including hot tubs, gaming areas, a garden, be quite a few amenities in the building. This one, there'd be no additional access required to Main Avenue. The estimated project cost is $20 million. Construction, they would want to get in there and start in September. If possible, they might want to even try to get in ahead as our contractor leaves. Their contractor would be moving in, so it would start this fall and be completed in December of 2020. The third proposal is from the Fargo Housing Authority. This would be a 5-story mixed-use building. Less details on this one. I think they would need some more time to get some of the details developed in the financing. They note there'd be 4 commercial spaces on the main floor. There'd be 48 underground parking spots, between 40 and 60 apartments. Again, they have to work out some access to Main Avenue. That's the only images I have of that one. So the Finance Committee are heavily involved in the flood fight right now, and so we haven't scheduled anything, but our plan is to meet with all 3 developers and then bring a recommendation to the City Commission. But just want to see if you have any questions or comments on these proposals.
The strip mall that the Frying Pan is in, has there been any discussion about the redevelopment of that space? It seems like that little mall is underutilized and struggling a little bit other than the Frying Pan itself.
I haven't talked to them in any details. You can see from this proposal, quite a few square feet of the strip mall would be removed for this. There'd be some commercial back in, but there'd probably more be looks like there might be even a net loss of commercial space. I don't have those numbers yet, but I don't know if there's anything long-term for it. Austin Morris is here from Enclave. I don't know if you want to address that question or if that's private at this point. Want to go to the other podium? We have all sorts of new procedures in this room. Again, this is Austin Morris with Enclave Development, one of the partners in this proposed project.
So the goal with the existing frying pan building that would be remaining is to redevelop that, or I should say skin it, so that it meshes well with the proposed new development. The existing convenience store service station is not owned by the same property owner, but obviously this area could use some love. So we're working with the owner of the Gateway Center to at least redevelop the exterior facade so that it meshes well with the overall development.
Yeah, thank you.
Austin, is there any, just because the other 2 proposals had some affordable housing in it, I'm assuming there's no affordable housing planned in the Enclave development?
No, none planned.
Jim, by affordable too, that the first one and the third one would be subsidized housing, I take it? I mean, through a city program, I mean, that's Beyond Shelter does, and that's what the Fargo Housing Authority does, right? I mean, so, there's no thoughts about this and the trouble, the building structure that we've been having with the high-rise around the corner? Is there anything about this would help out that situation, or just curiosity?
I think, you know, the future of the high-rise is certainly in question right now. I believe the Housing Authority is kind of actively moving people out of that building. There was a fire recently, and the cost to upkeep the building, I think their plan is to try to really disperse people throughout the community, but there's no, you know, financing for it. I think both the proposals with, you know, for instance, the Beyond Shelter, they've got requests into the city. They're anticipating trying to get $1 million of funds from the city through HUD grants to make it work. They're hoping to get $1 million from the Housing Trust Fund from the state. However, that bill was killed, I believe, today. And so the financing for the Beyond Shelter is that going to be difficult to put together and needs a lot more work. I think the Housing Authority needs even more work to get that financing together.
Nicole?
Yeah, and we have Christopher here with Beyond Shelter and Steve here with the Housing Authority, if you have any questions for them as well.
Thank you.
I do for the representative for the Housing Authority. So the Housing Authority would, if it's making a proposal for that corner there, would then somehow be incorporating the high-rise into the plan.
If Jim would bring up that slide of ours, the last one, we had the architectural firm actually put something together showing the high-rise not being there anymore. If you look at the bottom picture on the left is the new structure, and when you see the other three buildings there, that's what we're looking at possibly with the high-rise, is to go to 2 buildings of housing and a parking area.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have anything to add, Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I'd like to add, with Beyond Shelter, the programs that we use to build affordable housing, we utilize tax credit programs, the LIHTC and HIF, when it's available. So what we're doing is we're buying down the rents so they're affordable for seniors, so they're not all Section 8 voucher holders and things like that. It's addressing rent levels at different AMIs.
Thank you. Any other discussion, commissioners? Or
Madam
Tony?
Chair,
Yeah.
if I may, thank you, Jim, for the update. We had put this in motion, I think 2-3 months ago at City Commission for this piece of land that we owned because of the buyout, and granted there's some uniqueness to it with we own the property and, you know, whether or not planning is involved. I thought at a minimum there should be a public presentation on this before we get to the City Commission meeting. And from my perspective, we know we're going to build a roundabout at that intersection. We know we're going to have a piece of land that we're talking about here today. We know that we're going to have development in the Mid-America Steel site someday. And we know that just south of City Hall here, there's an opportunity for a plaza, et cetera. And the worst thing that can happen, in my opinion, is we had this brought through and then we vote on it, move forward without having you folks aware of this. And I believe we should have some more dialogue on what's the right use of this property, whether it's these proposals or others that look to the future, because once a decision is made, we're in it 50, 60, 70 years. And what's the plan for this side of downtown? And I still struggle with that. because I don't know if we've put the time in to really define what these three pieces of property mean for the next 100 years. And I throw that out only as my perspective on this, and felt you should be aware of this before we get too far down the road. And who knows what the city commission agenda action is going to be, but I'm still struggling with what do we want this area, our intro into North Dakota through Fargo, to be. And I struggle with the housing part, I'll just be honest. I think it's more than that. And but that was my goal, to make sure you're aware of it, and we'll see where this goes with staff discussion and ultimately city commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Grinberg. Another
Just
comment?
one other question, probably for the Fargo Housing Authority. With the high-rise, I mean, I realize that's been an ongoing process of getting people out of there over the years now because of whatever structural issues. Is there a plan in place for, and not knowing your long-range plans as far as other facilities to handle your needs?
Well, at the moment, John, we're trying to put together, of course, we're working with HUD, so it always takes time because it's, you know, at the federal level. And we have to go through a long process with HUD to vacate that property because they want the protection for the tenants in the building, that they have somewhere to go, that we just don't close a building and put 248 people out on the street. So it's going to take us some time. In this proposal, we were allowing for some of that, in that if we could get the funding, that this building would not be all public housing. It'd be just like similar to what Beyond Shelter's doing. There'd be different AMIs and there are different levels of people living in it to support the building. In the meantime, you know, we're working on getting HUD to approve a demolition of the building. Pretty much, I'm the operations person, and they pretty much have done enough analysis now to determine that it's not worth fixing. You know, it takes them a long time to come to that decision because they're still looking at, once it's gone, it's gone. So what we're working on with them now is to gradually empty the building, and then as things progress in funding, redeveloping it. Our plan right now is something similar to what's on the screen there, with going back to a 3-building, lower-rise building, separating it out. Again, that would be built with various income levels in the building. It wouldn't all be, as the high-rise is now, public housing.
Thank you. Any other comments, commissioners?
Commissioner Grinberg, I'd just like to kind of say that I appreciate, you know, kind of the idea of kind of slowing down and making sure that as these things develop, that we're keeping an eye on the cohesive vision of those parcels of land, because that sort of design and that sort of opportunity, you know, to design that for impact, kind of branding Fargo as you enter it is extremely significant. And it's real easy to think about them as separate pieces and do this, do that, do the other. But here's an opportunity to really reimagine what that entrance into Fargo looks like. So I appreciate that kind of staying on the burner as we consider these things.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bachmeyer, if I may, you were much more eloquent than I was.
Rocky?
You know, I was thinking about that as well, and I won't try to repeat what he said. That was great. But, you know, we also sort of have a commitment to the housing authority and to that population of need. And maybe just a random idea, but it'd sure be nice if this ends up going to a private developer in some sort. You know, is there any potential to trade other developable land in the city that's maybe not the entrance to the city or, you know, this downtown focus, but where we could, you know, serve the needs of the housing authority as well in some sort of land swap and sort of kill two birds with one stone, potentially, something like that.
I have a comment. Wouldn't that have more to do with the design of the building than it would the population? The first one here, the Beyond Shelter, seemed to have a really interesting architectural look to it. And I don't think we should just assume that because the Housing Authority has a history of association with a certain kind of population, that that population shouldn't be included. It seemed like that Beyond Shelter was incorporating all kinds of a variety of populations, and also the architectural details seem very interesting. So if we're talking about the entry into Fargo, I think architecture is more significant.
And I think the difference, maybe just to comment in case my comments were taken wrong, is the other two had a mixed development feature where there was commercial, and it seems close to downtown. It's nice we've been going down that mixed use route. And so I think a mixed use of housing and commercial is ideal in this situation. That's my preference.
Well, thanks for the good discussion, and thanks for presenting, Jim, and Commissioner Grinberg for bringing it to our attention. With that, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.